Living my bucolic life, free of big city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So I am going to be creating a gown today, and this is going to be for my daughter Morgan. Now I'm going to put some photos up somewhere, don't know where yet, but she is, you know, recently engaged, and she's going to be getting wedding engagement portraits taken. And she gave me an inspiration photo that I'm showing you, that she wanted a dress like this. And so she's going to be traveling. She lives in Chicago. She's traveling down to Florida in another week or so to get them taken with her future in-laws and things like that. So I had to first find the fabric. I needed to get it shipped to me. And so it's nighttime right now that I'm getting started, because I have to get this thing cut out so I can start sewing on it really quick, because I only have a few days to get it made and get it shipped to her before she leaves town to go traveling. So let me show you the fabric. Oh, first of all, so based on the photo, I am assuming that a wrap dress could work for this, you know, and that way she can adjust however deep she wants that V-neck, you know, some like it deeper than others. And I have made this pattern before, and I think it will work. I made a very, very loud colored gypsy dress out of this, is what I called it, with like lace sleeves and all kinds of stuff. She came to visit for a little bit, tried it on, it fit her. And so because it's a wrap dress, you know, it's flexible. So I got her measurements. I think we're good to go. So I'm going to be using this as a base, but I'm going to be making some modifications to it as we go. And the fabric is very sparkly. Let's see if I can pull this over. It has sequins all over it and kind of a nude colored mesh, okay? So if I can put my hand in here, you can see the mesh itself is like a nude color with golds. It's like gold, glitter, and sequins. And the sequins are just glued on. They are not sewn on. So as you can imagine, I have sparkles everywhere up here, but that's okay. Now the skirt itself and the bodice, I'm going to be lining. And I have this lining, which is like a cream color with hints of peach, I would call it, okay? This is just a regular nylon, feels like nylon lining, but for this purpose, I think that that's going to be just fine. So when you put the two together, let's see if I can do that, it's going to look like this, okay? And I think that's fairly similar to the inspiration photo. That's as close as I could come, you know? So I am going to clear off my table, get my pattern pieces out, somehow get my very, very sparkly fabric down and start cutting it out. Okay, so the first thing that I am noticing is this skirt. It's like a circle. Well, it's not a full circle. What are we? We're slightly smaller than a full circle skirt. But the piece I did, it like came down to this funny little point, okay, it had points. I need to make my skirt, my final length on my skirt, 40 inches from waist to the final hem. So instead of cutting it at 40, I'm going to cut it at 41. That way, no, I'm going to cut it at 42. That way I have enough room for a seam allowance at the top, a hem, a little bit extra in case I need to, you know, line everything up well. So instead of remaking the pattern, what I'm going to do is lay this on my fabric. I think I'm going to cut my lining fabric out first. And I'm going to just measure down to 40 inches on the sides and then all the way over. Okay, so I've just had my first issue, just laying out the lining. And my problem is I don't think I'm going to have enough fabric to do a circle skirt. But if you look at the inspiration photo, that to me looks like I could use a gathered skirt onto the bodice of this dress. And I will have plenty of fabric for that. And I think that that's going to work out well. I'm scratching my head and hoping at this point. So that's what I'm going to do. So I am just going to pull this rectangular pattern off here. And the lining that I am using is 60 inches wide. I am going to cut 2 rectangular pieces straight across, so they'll be 60 inches wide and 42 inches long. Okay, so I'm going to cut those, and those are going to be my skirt pieces. That's going to give a skirt circumference of 120 inches. I think that's going to be great. So at this point, what I did is I just tore it, you know, so that I could make sure that it was like on grain and even. And then this stuff wanted to fray and, you know, make a mess on me because I tore it. So I went ahead and serged down the torn side of both of my strips of fabric. So it's got a selvage on each side and nice long strips. These are going to be my 2 skirt pieces, so I'm just going to set them aside. Now, one thing that I need to point out on this pattern, where is my pattern? Here it is. Okay, this pattern was not meant to be lined the way they put it out. Okay, so it has a whole bunch of facing pieces and things. I am lining my skirt and lining my bodice, so that means that a lot of those facing pieces are not going to be used because, you know, it will be lined. Oh, do you see that? Do you see all the sparkles down there? That's just from setting it down for a minute. Anyhow, so just, you know, a heads up that the construction on this, even if you saw the other video that I made this pattern, the construction this time is going to be totally different. I am actually thinking of going ahead and cutting out my skirt pieces from my glitter fabric right now, just so I have both skirt pieces out of the way because they are the biggest ones, and then I can concentrate on the smaller pieces and the sleeves and the bodices and things like that. Okay, so my glitter fabric, this is actually the wrong side, that's the right side. It is also 60 inches wide, so that's going to make this a lot easier. So I am just going to measure down to where 60 inches is, fold it very carefully and cut along that fold. These sequins are very small. I'm not going to use my really good scissors. I think I might use my Fiskars for cutting this, but I think that the Fiskars will cut through them. Yeah, they'll cut through it without any problem. So that's what I'm going to be using. So let me get 2 60-inch strips of this. And since this is just, it's like that illusion nap that has a little bit of stretch to it, which is nice, you know. I'm not going to be serging this, obviously. Actually, I'm not even going to be hemming this. This layer is just going to be, it is what it is, you know. So let me get 2 strips, 42 inches tall, 60 inches wide, cut out of this. Okay, so now that the skirt pieces are cut, I wanted to start looking at the bodice. Now, the bodice, here's the back and here is the bodice front. And on the pattern, what they have is this extra piece that they're calling a midriff that they want you to cut a couple of. But basically, it's just an extension here. And so it would be like this. And then they are going to have you run elastic through a double midriff piece. Because I want to make this as simple on the outside as possible because, you know, this fabric is all the decoration it needs. I'm thinking that what I'm going to do is just extend the bodice piece so that, like if I line up this dot and that dot, so that it comes at an angle here and then comes straight down, basically to join these 2 pieces together. If I overlap it by 1.25 inches, that's going to give me the exact length that this needs to be, because 5/8 plus 5/8 is 1.25 inches. So that's what I'm going to do, both for the front and the back pieces. I'm going to cut it out like this. I'm going to cut it out of the lining piece first, because it'll be easy to see what I'm doing, and then I'm going to use that piece that I cut out of the lining as the guide that I'm going to cut out my very, very glittery fabric with. So give me a minute to get these together. The other thing is the sleeve. Now, this pattern came with a long sleeve that has a cuff and everything like that. The sleeve I am doing is going to have a gathered elastic bottom, okay? I think that that will be very in keeping with the inspiration photo. And so I'm just going to go with this. At the bottom, it's a little swoopy. That's fine. I will be running a casing through it. I think that it is plenty wide because she tried on the one that there she is. She tried on the one that I made and it seemed to fit her fine. But just because, you know, large, glorious sleeves are always fabulous, if when I'm cutting this out, I can see I have extra room, I might just make it extra wide just for fun. But I want to put this aside and actually do my bodice pieces first, cut out of my lining, and then I'll show you what I came up with. Okay, so here is my back piece, here is my midriff piece. And looking at it, the midriff piece is 3¼ inches. So let me take off 5/8 for the seam allowance. So that's going to put me to right here, okay? Which is 2 5/8 inches. Is what I need to add to this piece, come on, to this piece here in order to make it the same size. Let me track down my pen again. I'll be right back. No idea where my pen went. I'm just going to get my little chalk roller here. We haven't brought her out for a while. Line this edge up, come down 2 5/8 and a little bit over. And then add again 2 5/8 here, and so on and so forth. And that's going to give me my cutting line right here and up that I will also be cutting out of my sparkle fabric. So that's one piece. Okay, so this is the bottom of my front piece, and just like the back, if I can raise you up a bit, I'm going to be extending it down, but instead of extending it this way, it's just coming straight down. That's going to mimic the other piece a lot more. So if I'm putting my ruler so that 5/8 of an inch in is centered on the little dot for my size right here, and coming fairly straight down right here, I'm going to go down 2 5/8 inches. Does not want to draw on this lining. Okay, to this point here. So if I continue making a little mark, it'd be easier if I put it this way, at 2 5/8 inches across. I can do the same thing all the way over. Now on this side, yeah, I'm just gonna follow that edge straight down. That will make a lot of sense there. And there's the hash mark, okay? So I'm just going to be extending that, and my cutting line will be right here. Okay, so I'm about to cut out the sleeve here, and I'm not lining the sleeve, it's going to be sheer, but I do have a couple inches on each side that I can make it slightly wider, and I think the easiest way is going to do like a little impromptu type pivot and slide kind of thing. So I am just putting my pattern on here, and got it so that I've got a pin in it at the top circle, okay? And I am just going to bring it over until I'm fairly close over here to this side. Put a couple weights on it and go ahead and cut down the bottom like so. And here. Oh my goodness, such a mess, such a mess. Up here to where this armhole starts. Okay, and then I'm going to take it back up to the top circle. All right, now I'm going to move my weights, rotate the pattern. You know, it's still attached up there at the top, and I can get it off of all of this sparklies down there and rotate it over to this side until I've taken up most of the room over here. And that's just going to add a few more inches. You know, why not be as glamorous as we can at this point? So there we go. That is going to be my sleeve piece. So you can see I've added a lot extra, but I think that that is pretty good. And I think that that is about it for cutting out all of my gown pieces tonight. I have 2 skirt pieces, the bodice back, the bodice front, the lining for all of that, and my sleeve. Now for the inside casing that I'm going to be putting elastic in, I'm just going to cut a strip of lining for that. And so, you know, we can make all of this work. So I will see you in the morning. Good morning and welcome to the next day. So I have a scrap here, obviously, that I've been playing with to try to get some ideas of how this fabric's going to react. So the first thing I did here was I just serged the 2 pieces together. Okay, look how sparkly that is. And it did pretty well. The sequins themselves are very thin, they're plastic, they're not metal or anything like that. My needle seemed to have no problem with it, the cutter seemed to have no problem with it. So I think that is going to be a good way to finish off the edges. And I've been thinking about this front edge because once I got this settled, that this was going to work, I was thinking, you know what would be the easiest for me, and I think the best looking, is to be able to just combine both pieces for my bodice here. I'm just talking about my bodice. Combine them, make them so that they're like this, so I can use them as a single unit instead of 2. Because what I was originally thinking was that this seam here, like pretend this is the tie and the skirt's down here, okay? I know, not accurate. But anyway, I was thinking that I was going to sew it together and then flip it inside out. But the thing is that this is so sheer. If I did that, you were going to see all of the funky seam allowances and everything through this. And that was not going to be pretty. So what I did here is I just took an edge that was serged and I folded it over and just ran a row of straight stitching over it. And I'm thinking that that will work for this diagonal part here. And if it'll work for that diagonal part, I think that I'm just going to go ahead and make it work for everything. You can see there's sequins everywhere in my room, but I think it's going to be beautiful. And when you see this in a big layout, these sequins are kind of like in the shape of branches, which is kind of fun. So with all of that, what I'm trying to get at is that my first step is going to be to work on my bodice. Okay, so starting out with my front one, I am not going to worry about transferring over markings. I'm going to keep my pieces here handy so I can just compare, but transferring markings onto sequin fabric is not my idea of fun this morning. So what I'm going to do is make 2 separate, or 2 opposing, I would say, bodice front pieces here. Can you see? I hope so. So if this is one side, here's the other. And there is a right side to my sparkly fabric and a wrong side. So obviously the one with the sequins is the right side. And where am I? I do believe that this piece will go here with this one. So what I'm going to do is just very carefully match these 2 together. I am going to pin it together. I was toying with the idea of just using a light glue or something, but I think that it worked so well on my scrap that if I just pin them together, That will work. And I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna serge carefully around the edges. Wish me luck, we're gonna see how this goes. I wanted to mention that this is the back piece, and I'm gonna go around that. I did the 2 front ones. So far I've had good success. I found that it works a lot easier if I keep my pins at least about 2 inches apart. It seems to keep everything on track a lot better. And one needle got broken and it was going through a chunk, you know, a very thick chunk for a long distance, kind of like this, where you have multiple layers of things going on. So, you know, that happens, but all in all, it's working pretty well. This fabric, it looks like there's pieces that it's a little bit glued together in a crease. Oh, that's not good. Well, let me see if I can pull this little fold apart here and get it evened out before I serge the edges. If you're curious, I did buy this fabric on a Etsy shop. I think it was called 𝐾𝐸 Textiles, 𝐾𝐸, I think, if I'm remembering right. And they did ship out pretty darn fast. And, you know, for what I was looking for, the price was decent. So let me go ahead and get the back piece serged together and I'll show you how it's looking. Okay, so here's my back piece, and I am just going to go ahead and sew my front piece to it at the shoulders and the side seams. Now, if you can see, I have a whole lot more width up here than here. I'm going to need to gather this, and I had completely forgotten about that, but that's okay. I'm trying to think of the best way to do gathering stitches on this kind of fabric, and I think for this short little piece I'm just going to do it by hand, you know, with a needle and thread, but I'm going to need to come up with something for my longer skirt piece. So, you know, let me go ahead and get this pinned on here. I might even make tiny pleats in it up here. Let me play with it for a second. I'll let you know. Okay, what I've decided is I'm just going to make pleats. Okay, so I have pinned 3 little pleats there so that when it's sewed, it's going to, you know, make a nice little softly pleated top up there, so it's going to fit nicely. I'm going to go ahead and do the same on this side. And the side seams, no pleating there, obviously, just sewing it. And I'm going to make all of my seam allowances. Shoulders and side seams here at 5/8 of an inch. And I am going to be pressing these open. I can iron this, even though I'm dealing with a, you know, acetate type of lining and plastic sequins. As long as I am very careful, I can press it with steam. So, you know, keep an eye on your temperature and how long you're actually keeping it on there, but it is definitely possible. So let me get both of my front pieces sewn onto my back piece. Okay, so this is what I've got right now, and I think what I want to do is start thinking about how I'm going to tackle this seam. And remember in the beginning when I was looking at this, I was thinking I'm just going to turn it under, which could still work. The other option I'm thinking of is using some of my fusible tricot tape. This is 1 inch wide. It's lovely stuff. It's got fusible stuff on one side, extremely soft, and it flexes, okay? And I'm thinking that this actually might be a good thing to use, kind of like a bias tape, where I would put a row of stitching and then I could turn the entire thing to the inside and it would give a really nice finish and help reinforce it. So I'm playing with that right now. I need to strategize which order I am going to do all of my stuff here. Now in the instructions, and in the other dress I made, they have you incorporate a grosgrain ribbon, and I used a hook instead of a button, into this midriff piece, which I kind of incorporated half of it into my bodice already. And the way I'm thinking right now is I need to basically, you use that midriff piece for a casing, okay? And so what I'm planning right now, you know, could change, but right now, oh look, that is where my needle broke and it started snagging up, but you know, that's the inside, so no one cares. I'm thinking of getting a piece of my lining fabric and making it about 2 inches, 2.5 inches tall, and just putting that across here, and I'll show you how I'll do that, so that I can use that as a casing, and doing that before I actually sew the skirt on, so that when I sew the skirt onto it, it's locking in the bottom of that casing. That's my plan right now. So what I need to do is measure my total length here and cut a piece of my lining fabric. I'm actually going to cut it to 2 inches. That's going to give me a seam allowance on top, a seam allowance on bottom, and enough room for maybe like a 3/4 inch elastic. I think that that is fine. I know it was wider on the other one. That's okay. This is a different dress. All right, I've got a long strip cut here. I actually had to cut 2 lengths of my fabric. One of them looks like where it's sewed together. And I did serge it along the edges just to keep it from unraveling, because that's never fun. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to put my ruler here at 1.5 inches, and at that position I'm going to put the edge of my little piece of fabric here. I'm actually going to stick it out a little bit to start with. So I am putting my ruler down here at about 1.3 inches, and I'm going to line up the edge of my strip and pin it along. Once I have it pinned all the way across, I'm going to come back and do a row of stitching, you know, just inside all of my serging here. So I'm going to end up with probably about a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. Okay, so just a quick view of what we've got here. Now, keeping in mind that this is going to be gathered up with an elastic, and that's going to give it the shaping, okay? What I am thinking is that here's my little strip I just sewed. I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and put together the skirt. Sew the skirt on here before I finish this, because then once the skirt is sewn on and that seam allowance is pressed up, then I can pull this down and cover it and give a really nice waist finish, you know, because the less of this stuff poking, the more comfortable it will be. So what that means is I'm going to just leave the bodice, you know, just sitting there, staying out of the way, and get my 2 big rectangle skirt pieces. Okay, so if you remember, for my skirt, I just have 2 very long strips. The fabric for both my lining and sparkle are 60 inches wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 big rectangles and sew them together along my selvage edge and press that seam allowance open, so I end up with one really, really long rectangle. And I need to do that for both my lining and my sparkle fabric. So in my sparkly fabric, there's a place where the print, you know, kind of begins, and that's where I'm pinning it. And I am using my very special, for tricky fabric pins. They're forked like this, and they will stay into things like this, whereas just a regular straight single pin won't. So I'm just going to use those. These are clover, I think. Yeah, clover. Wonderful little things. Not sure exactly what they called, but they do work well. So I'm just going to finish pinning it all the way down, and then when I stitch it, I'm going to stitch it, you know, right here where the sequin starts, and then open that up. Okay, so this sequin fabric, it's not terrible to sew on, but it's very slow and things happen, you know. It's a little tricky, but we're going to make it work. So I'm going to put them together now, and I have my lining, so my seam allowances are down, so this is the right side. And what I'm doing is I am going to sandwich it, make sure I got the right part here, yes, so that I have the right side of my lining and then my wrong side of my sparkle is against the right side. So basically, looking through the sheerness here, I'm seeing right side of this and right side of that, okay? I'm going to open up these seam allowances just a bit here so it's less bulky up there. And I am just going to join the two up on top here. So let me, once again, carefully spread it out, pin it across the top, and I am going to serge it together so that this at the very top will act as a single piece. Okay, so I have started to attach my skirt to my bodice. First thing I did is match up the seam of my skirt piece here to my center back of my bodice. Okay, this is still up out of the way. And then I matched up, come way over here, get this piece. Oh, so many sparkles everywhere. Okay, so I'm roughly lining up the opaque part, the lining part here. We can fine tune that later. Stick a pin here, and so I have this section. I'm going to divide that in half by pulling them out both sides until those two pins are together. Take those 2 points that I was holding, put that together and pin it. Just kind of splitting the difference there. And I'm going to do it one more time. Come on. Taking this midpoint here, separating it out, and I'm doing it this way so that I have 1, 2, 3, probably 8 sections by the time I'm done that are all about the same size. And that's important to me because I am going to be fork pleating this, and to figure out the proportions I'm going to need to make it somewhat uniform, it's really a good idea to have uniform sections. So I did the first little section using this size fork. It's a lovely little fork. I've discovered that I can get 4 pleats in one section and give them about an inch in between or so. I'm not going to be too crazy about it because there is going to be elastic on top of this, okay? I'm not gathering because the thought of having to gather glued on sparkles is just, too much for me to bear. So basically, I'm going to try to make it so my pleats fan off in one direction this way, another direction this way, and they meet together in the back, okay? So on here, this is my front. So this was my last pleat. I have about an inch or so until my pin. So I'm going to stick my fork in here and flip it over. And we're going to call that one good. Then put my fork out here, stick my tine in, and I'm putting it, it's based on how long your fabric is and everything. For me, I have about 3 inches between where I can see the end of this pleat and where I put my fork in, okay? Then I can just flip it over, and there I go. And I just keep on making these little pleats. If you want deeper pleats, use a bigger fork. If you want narrower ones, well, everyone has their own right to do their projects exactly how they want to, okay? So once I get these pleats put in all the way around, hang on, I need to get it closer to the edge here. I ran to a sequin, imagine that. Once I have it pinned down all the way around, I'm going to come back and with my regular straight stitch, I'm going to run a row right here, probably not 5/8. No, I will. I will be using 5/8 inch seam allowance. That will work. Okay, all the way across here, across the entire skirt. Okay, so this is the inside view here. This is my thought. This little flap that I put on earlier, I'm going to be able to come in, turn it under like this, and make a nice casing here that's going to cover up all of, you know, the skirt seam allowance and everything. And that's going to be big enough for my elastic to go through. And I have some 1/2" elastic that I think will work pretty well with this. So that's what I'm going to be using. The pattern itself came with an elastic guide piece, so I am going to cut it. It says cut 2. Oh, that was, okay, it says cut 2 because on the original pattern you put 2 rows of elastic in. I'm only putting 1, so I'm only going to cut 1 of these. And because my dress seemed to fit her fairly well, and I believe I used this length of elastic on mine, so we're going with it. Okay, so I have decided that the way I'm going to do the casing then is just fold it under about 3/8 of an inch, line that up with the stitching line that I just made, and stick a little pin in there, and then I am going to machine stitch this again. So there is a chance that if I edge stitch this here, there's a chance that on the outside, my light just went off there, that I might see a little bit of stitching there if I do it this way. So just to make sure I do not, I'm just going to fold it down completely flat. If I fold it down completely flat, this edge here is serged, okay? So it's not going to unravel. I think it's going to be fine. This is pretty much going to be a one-shot wearing kind of dress as far as I know right now. So if I have this folded down and on the right side I come back and do a stitch in the ditch kind of thing right here, hopefully it will catch this, you know, if I'm really careful that as I sew I make sure that it's folded down right. And it should be invisible and give me a nice casing down there. So that is what I'm going to do. Just probably starting up here. Now at these edges, yeah, this stuff is all, you know, all over the place at the front edges, so I will be evening that out later, but I don't have to deal with it right at this moment. Okay, well that plan did not work. I think because I have like triple layers of sequins, I broke a needle pretty much right off. So plan B is that I am going to pull this, you know, I've only got about, what, 5 inches of stitching in here. I'm going to pull that out and then just do it by hand. It won't take me long to just, you know, tuck it, whip stitch it, and that'll look pretty. And I don't have to worry about my needle trying to go through 3, 4, you know, where the seam allowances is, it's even more, a lot of layers of sequins. So let me pull these stitches out, get that whip stitch down, and then we'll thread the elastic through, and then we'll have a much better idea of the shape of this dress. All right, so I've done a couple things. First of all is I pulled in the elastic. I know they gave the elastic guide. I actually ended up cinching it in about 10 inches just because I don't know if my elastic was more stretchy than what they had gauged for, or if my dress, because this is getting heavy. Even though it's a very lightweight, you know, tulle and lightweight lining, you put it together with all the sparkles and it's a big skirt, so it is getting kind of heavy. So I felt like I needed to do that. Now on this side, I went ahead and finished off this whole front opening edge, okay? You can see where they're just serged together at this point. This is that little bodice area there. I need to do that over on this side too, which is still very loosey-goosey. So let me see here. I need to get some of this elasticiness out of the way. I am going to end up trimming off just a little bit of this. I want this edge to come straight down all the way. So I'm just going to spend some time lining up my fabric here, lining up both of the layers so that they are ready to go, so that I can just start here and basically just serge it together all the way down, so that then on this side of the opening, these two pieces will be serged together and acting as a single unit, and this will all be nice and clean. Okay, so I need to make a couple ties for each side of my bodice front, and I'm going to use this scrap of lining. Don't worry about that blue line. I will erase it as soon as I go over to iron it. So I'm just cutting a couple strips, well, 4 strips. Let's see, how long are these things? They are 18 inches long, okay? They're about 2 inches wide. I'm going to fold them in half like so and just serge across them so I end up with a little piece that's going to be about that big. And I think that that's going to be big enough for me to flip, you know, right side out fairly evenly. And it's going to give a nice thin little tie because I don't want anything bulky both underneath and on top. And I'll show you how those are going to work. And just quickly before I sew these, I am just folding them in half because that is going to help these slippery little buggers want to behave themselves while I go to serge the edges. So I've got them serged. I'm just going to clip all these guys apart here. And I'm using my lobster claw loop turner thingy here just because I think that it will work well. So basically it has a curved side and a pointy side. You push it onto the curved side, pinch it with the pointy side, and then bring everything over here. Okay, and just one at a time, easy as that, until I have all 4 of my little straps turned. Okay, so I've got my straps pressed nice and flat, and I want to put on the ones that are going to be hidden, the underneath ones first. So over here on this side seam, on this side, on top of the elastic, in the elastic casing, I have one pinned, and I have it pinned with the strap going back towards the back of the bodice because I want to sew it right here, and then once I sew it, it's going to come forward like that, and then I'm going to sew it one more time over there, so it'll actually be stitched on twice in this little area. And up here on the front, this one, and it is this way because I am still going to be, you know, finishing off this whole side like so, so that when that is done, this will be coming off this way. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to be doing the other straps exactly the same way. I want her to have the maximum flexibility for how much she wants to wrap this thing. Because, you know, in my inspiration photo, it was not wrapped very much, and it was very, very low. Low. But if that's what she wants, that's what she wants. But what if she doesn't? What if she wants it wrapped up, you know, a little more conservatively for the photos that go to the grandparents, you know? Well, then she has the option to cross her ties over a little bit more. So I'm just going to put them on here, go back to my machine, and I am using Pearl today, my Meister. She's a nice, very strong machine, so she works very well on all of these finicky fabrics, so did not want to risk it today. So anyway, add about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, going to go back and forth here, and here, here, and here, and I will be right back. Okay, so now those ties are in, so technically I could tie it. I think I put one of these straps on wrong, actually. I did. Oh my goodness. Okay, I was supposed to put, this one is correct in here, but this one on this side is supposed to be on the outside. Boy, so give me a second. Let me pull this off and pin it to the outside right here, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so let's try it again here. If I tie this front piece to this inside tie and then bring this over here, and I can tie this outside tie to this tie. Okay, I think we're back in business now. So what I want to do now, I know I still don't have sleeves on. I know that. We'll get there. But I want to go ahead and finish off this whole neck edge. And I've decided I am going to be using my tricot tape. So open this up here. All right. So basically my plan is that on the right side of my fabric, you know, one side of this has fusible stuff on it, this side here. This side does not. I'm going to sew it on so that the fusible side is up, and I'm going to put it on the right side of my fabric like this, so the raw edge line is up, and I'm just going to make a stitch about 1/4 inch in, just like that, all the way around. So it's going to start at the bottom of my hem, way down here, go all the way up around the back of my neckline, and back down to the bottom of the hem on the other side. I just realized I haven't shown you the machine of the day yet. So here is Pearl. She was my grandmother's machine. I repainted her. She was actually one of the first machines I repainted when I got the bug, you know. But I am using her. I'm just stitching on all of this tape. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a little bit. She's a big, heavy girl, and she bounces a little when she runs, but honestly, I do too, so we can relate to each other. She's a sweet, sweet old machine. We love her very, very much. And she has no problem going over the sequins and everything. The only problem I had is I'm using a size 9 needle, which is fairly thin, just because I didn't want to have any snags and everything. But because of that, it's not super strong when it's faced with a whole bunch of sequins at once. And she seems to be doing really well going over 1 or 2 layers at a time, you know, with thick sequins. But when you get more than 2 layers, that needle, that's the weakest link, is that needle. So anyhow, let me finish this up. So back over here at my ironing board now. So here is my little edging tape, the tricot tape that I just fused or sewed on, okay? So here's my plan. If I push the tricot tape out towards that seam allowance that way, and then fold it so it's just on the inside, so I see just a little bit of the edge of the fabric there, okay? Remember that this is a fusible tape, so what I'm hoping, and I'm going to try it out right here on the camera, is that if I place it, so again, I have maybe 1/8 of an inch or so of my sequin fabric showing, okay? Now I can hold this. I'm going to get my iron and iron it down to hold that in place, okay? So my goal is that the fusible tape is going to hold it well enough that I can press it and get a nice edge this way. I will come back and do an edge stitch on here because I don't want to count on the fusibleness, you know, holding everything forever. But that way it's going to hold it really nice for me so that when I come back and I edge stitch it from the right side, it'll look really nice. That's my goal at least. So let me just continue working my way around, folding it over, you know, nicely. Easy does it. Putting a little bit of heat and steam. Don't need a whole lot. Don't need a lot of pressure, that's for sure. And just enough to make sure this is nice and creased, the tape is fused, and we are good, ready to go. So I'm just going to work my way all the way around. And I finally got it all pressed. You would not believe how much sparkle is all over my sewing room. I don't think I'm ever going to get it out. I think I'm just going to have it in here forever, you know. My floor looks like it's hung over. Anyway, I am going to go ahead and looking at the right side of my sparkle here, I'm going to do an edge stitch probably about 1/4 inch in, starting down here at the bottom of the hem and going all the way around while everything is freshly pressed and everything, so it will hopefully hold its shape very well. I was able to get it around the neckline in the back. You know, that was the tightest curve, so I think that we are going to be all good there. Okay, so I want to show you what I have so far here. I've got it tied, you know, on the sides and everything, and I think it's cute. I think it's definitely very sparkly. I think that there's a couple things that are different than the inspiration photo, but I think that's close enough that it has the same vibe, you know what I mean? But it's definitely a lot of skirt here, a whole lot of sparkle. And she does have the option to make it lower or higher or whatever. So that's good. That's good. I think I'm going to call it a night. It is only about 6:30 in the evening, but with the darkness going on out there, it feels like 10 o'clock. So, you know, my internal clock is having issues. Tomorrow, I hope to get the hem done and get the sleeves in, and then she should be ready to ship. All right, so I wanted you to get a look at where we are this morning. It is the next day. I slept on it, and I sent a picture of the dress like this to my daughter last night. And she loved it, except it's a little blousy up here compared to the inspiration photo. So before I go any further with the hem and the sleeves, I am going to take a little bit out from up here. And I think that if I pinch out an inch, you know, like the old Special K commercial, that's going to take out the extra blousiness. And judging by how it's falling on the side here, I think that that's going to work pretty well too, just to smooth everything out. So I'll take it back to the table and show you where all of that's going to go. But I think that it's really pretty. And she liked it too, which is a big plus, you know. So there you go. Very happy. My sewing room, and honestly, all of my house, but mostly my sewing room, looks like it should be hung over. It looks like there was one crazy party in here because there is sequins and glitter everywhere. But, you know, it's all fun. So let me take this down, take it back to my sewing table, and I'll show you how I'm going to take up that extra blousiness in the bodice. Okay, so what I'm thinking, this is obviously the waistline, this is the upper part, is that if I pinch it out from just above that, that's going to work, and I could probably get away with, you know, just blending it down here and make sure that it's hidden in there really well, okay? My problem that I'm looking at right now is with the elastic in here, it's very difficult to get this nice and even stitching right there with all this elastic. And when I put my little ties on these sides, I did it stitching over the elastic too. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to pull off my side ties. Where's my razor blade? Here you are. And take those off. Cut a little opening here so I can let the elastic loose on at least one side, so that I can pull it out straight. And then once the elastic is pulled out straight, then I can come back and make that tuck, you know, fairly easily, I'm hoping. Okay, so I got my straps off, just opened a little bit of my whip stitching there, and I'm just gonna clip my elastic right here. I'm giving myself a little bit of extra so that hopefully, when I pull it back through, I'll be able to secure this to that, you know, underneath. That's my goal right now. Let me see if I can get this to pop back out. I know I need to pull these little stitches out a little bit more and get this whole waistline to lay nice and flat. Okay, so now that that is done, you see what I mean? I'm going to carefully make my tuck. I am aiming for a pinch that's probably going to be like this. I'm going to be using a zipper foot to try to get my seam line over here as close to the casing as I can. But let me go ahead and measure what I'm pinching here so I can try to keep it uniform. It looks like I'm pinching actually 3/4 inch. Let's do 5/8. 5/8 is easier, and I can use one of my little tapes as a guide. Okay, so one of the tricky parts is making sure I have both layers together, and I am basically putting my little tape, which is 5/8 of an inch wide, you know, as tapes usually are. I'm putting it so that I have about 1/4 inch from the edge. That's where my stitching line is going to be, so I can just kind of fold that, adjust it and everything to make sure that it's going to be uniform. That looks pretty good. Put a line here where my stitching line needs to be with my heat erasable pen, which will erase terribly well. So, and then I can just pin it in between, you know. Since I'm doing this up where the bodice is, where it's a lot shorter, this isn't going to take that long, hopefully. Again, hopefully. And so I'm doing the key points first, like center back, side seam, front seam, and then working my way in everything in between. So I've got it stitched back together, and I know it's hard to tell right now because I do not have the elastic in, so it's not really cinched in. But it does look like it's laying closer to where the actual waistline is that I have marked on the dress form. And so I'm going to call this good. This fabric is actually fairly thin. You know, it's just a lining in a tulle with glitter and stuff. So I don't think it's going to be that bulky. I'm going to go ahead and press this little fold that I have in here. Let me open it up to show you. I basically have this tuck here, and I think that it's going to be better if I press it up, just because I have so much stuff going down here into this waist area. I don't know though. That might actually be better because she is going to be putting a belt over this, you know, like in the inspiration photo. Let me press it down, see if it adds too much bulk. If it does, you know, we can improvise from there. Okay, so this is what it's looking like from the outside. And that seam that I just put in right here, it actually kind of makes it look more like a real waistband in there. So I don't think that's bad. I've pressed the seam allowance down. I don't want to clip it open or serge it or anything because, you know, it would be too messy right here. And I like having all of that sequiny stuff encased where it's going to be rubbing really tight against the body there. So I'm happy with that. I am. I need to go ahead and get my elastic pulled back through. I'm just going to reach in there with one of those long wiry loop turner kind of things from the place where I opened up my casing, which is right here. See if I can fish it out, and then I'll need to go back, of course, and put my straps back on, and then we'll be back in business. I wanted to show you what I did is once I got the elastic fished through, I came back and I hand stitched it to that other little end of elastic that I had here, and then I whip stitched that area closed. And I also came back, and it's, you know, it's not the most beautiful stitches, but it will do. I tacked down just the beginning of this little seam allowance here so that it's going to want to stay the way I want it to go. And then hopefully I will also do that at the side seams and in the center back, you know, and that will, again, hopefully keep this where it should be. If it looks like it's not, I can come back and just, you know, hand tack it down the entire way, which I can, you know, at this point, why not? But I need to do this little thing over on this side also, you know, keeping that in place. Yeah, it looks like I am going to hand tack that down. So give me a few more minutes. I'm going to put a nice song on my Spotify and just chill for a bit. Okay, so I've got, here, let me scoot you back some. Okay, I've got her back up on my dress form, and I'm going to show you it's a lot smoother here now than it was before. So I'm happy about that. The other thing I was thinking I might do, and I have not decided if I'm going to do that yet, is, let me move this so I can see, maybe put a little bit of invisible elastic, you know, that really 1/4 inch clear stuff I have, just right in here, just to kind of, you know, pull that so it won't hang loose. But I am not sure at this point how she's going to adjust it and how that's going to lay. So I might hold off on that for a bit. I'm going to go ahead and hem this. So let me tip the camera down so you can see what I'm looking at. So what she wants is 40 inches, excuse me, people walking downstairs, 40 inches from the center of the waist to the floor. And because this is cut as a rectangle, I can pretty much cut it uniform across the bottom. So when I measure just a few key points, like my front, wrong side, from my center front down, I can see my cut edge is at 41.5 inches. I'm going to turn her to her side waist, make sure it's the same, yeah. And from her back, is it the same? Yeah. Okay, fairly close, fairly close. So what I see is that the lining layer, I need to take up about 1.5 inches, okay? And I wasn't planning on doing a really deep hem, but honestly, for this, it's not gonna matter. So what I'm gonna do is just fold it twice. It's lining, it's very thin. I'm gonna fold it up 3/4 inch and then fold it up again, which should give me about 1.5 inches up, okay? And that's going to give a nice hem. For this part, once I have the lining at its final length, can you see me? Hello. Then I'm just going to trim this edge. I'm not going to hem it. I'm not going to serge it or anything. It's just going to be, you know, a cut edge, kind of like this, but shorter. And I think that that's going to look fine. So let me go ahead, pull this off, and get the hem going. You would not believe, well, you probably would if you've ever dealt with, you know, can't even see. If you've ever dealt with a lot of glittery stuff, you know, it has taken over my life here. Anyhow, I am going to measure where 1.5 inches hits on here. And right next to where the stitching line is, I'm going to come in here with my scissors, right about to there, okay, and trim that up. Okay, so this is trimmed off at 1.5 inches here, so that then I can do my fold up at 3/4 inch and fold up again, and this is going to be laying nice and flat there. I will be trimming it off even once I'm done hemming, but that way it's ready to go. So let me get a pin here just to hold this initial part in, okay? And then get the sparkle out of the way. I'm just going to do that a few times. I can eyeball 3/4 inch fairly well at this point. So I'm going to put in one little fold, put in another little fold, and stick a pin. Get my pins over here, you know. And if it's not exact, that's okay, because this is such a full skirt. And then just iron everything in between to press that crease in. And that's going to be enough that I can have that as a guide just to stitch straight across. You know, I might put one more pin in the middle there. Okay, and just kind of do that all the way down. See a spot, fold it up, press it in. I have my iron set fairly low temperature, so don't worry about it sitting there. Put a pin here and come back. Okay, so let me just do that all the way across, and then I'm going to come back and just machine stitch it, edge stitch it right along the top here. Okay, so I've got that hem sewed in, you know, down here, you can see. And while I was over there, I did decide to go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit of clear elastic right here so that, you know, it'll want to hug the body a little bit easier. Right up here while it's still flat, I think that's fine. It's just this bottom part that seemed to be gapey. So I've got my clear, it's like 1/4 inch clear elastic, and I'm just going to start it about 9 inches above. I'm not going to stretch it extremely tight, but I'm going to, let me see, what am I going to add? I'm going to put about 1 inch of ease in here. So if this is 1 inch shorter than my space and I put it right here, well, that's a little too much. Let me try 1/2 inch. What will that look like? 1/2 inch is, if I put this here so that my end of my elastic is about 1/4 inch below, I think that's pretty good. That's a good amount. I feel safe with that. So I'm going to do the same on both sides, and I'll mark it. I'm going to start it here, end it down here so that the edge of my elastic is about 1/4 inch below that seam line. I'm just going to stick a pin there, and I'll do the same on the other side so I know it's the same amount of ease. And then just on top of where this stitching line is, I'm just going to run another row, and I can see that stitching line through my elastic, so I can line it up pretty well here. I'm just going to stretch it out straight, sew it over that little stitching line so it'll, you know, be a little bit flatter right there. Okay, so this is the outside, you know, which should look, you know, normal, except it has a little bit of give to it now. And the inside, I just have that invisible elastic sewn onto that seam, just with a slight amount of stretch incorporated. That's just to hug the body a little bit better. So now over here, move you, I have her laid on my table and I'm trying to make sure, I'm just doing one little section at a time, that I have the bottom layer pulled out nicely, and I'm trying to trim that bottom layer maybe an 1/8 of an inch or so lower than the hemmed edge, you know, all the way around here, just one little bit at a time. When I had to trim this center back seam of my tool, just so it won't fray, because I cut off my knot, I just put a little stitch in there and tied a knot on it to secure that seam so that it won't want to fly open down here. All right, so it is time to get these sleeves made, and I wanted to point out I'm folding my sleeve in half, and there is hardly any difference between the back side and the front side. This is the back, this is the front. You know, there's a little bit, but because I'm doing this out of this, you know, and it's tulle and, or illusion, I guess I should say, illusion and sequins, I don't think it's going to make a difference. So I am not stressing over front versus back at this point. And also, this is a very full sleeve cap, and I'm going to be pleating that sleeve cap too, just because, you know, gathering with this stuff, I just can't deal with that right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is match up my side seams here and stitch up my side seams at 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then yes, I am pressing this seam allowance open. And yes, because I am just using this stuff, I am using my, you know, 2-pronged pins that are special for finicky silky fabrics. So I'm just going to do the best I can to match up the cut edges. All right, so I've got that seam put in and pressed open, and every time I have to iron the right side of this, I get sequins stuck to my iron, and then I have to get my cloth and wipe off the bottom of my iron. It's, you know, it's all fun, but this is in. I'm going to go ahead and put the elastic casing in the bottom first. And here's the thing, I'm going to be using the same clear elastic that I used on the front. So let me just see if I can get away with, well, no, I am going to make a casing. First, I'm just going to put a stretch and sew it on kind of thing, but I think the casing will be better, unfortunately. Well, give me a minute to think here. I was just playing with a piece of my clear elastic to see if I could even stretch it enough to be able to do that, and I can't. This is way too big. So here's the other thing. All of this glitter and sequin stuff rubbing on your wrist, I don't know how that's going to work. So I am going to make a casing, but with a different piece of fabric over the top. So what I'm thinking right now is similar to what I did down that front edge, where I'm going to take my fusible tricot, but I'm not going to really work on fusing it this time. Oh my gosh, look, there's a little slice right there. Okay, I'm going to just use it as a casing material. So the first thing I'm going to do is just sew this on with the fused side out at 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, so at this point, this is what it looks like. I just have it sewed to the right side, okay? The key to this whole thing is not to press this until I have my elastic in, and even then, you know, because as soon as I iron it, the fusy dots on here are going to want to grab, and I don't want to deal with that right now. If I had non-fusible tricot tape, I'd be using that, but I do not. I actually have to put in 𝐸𝐤𝐞. This, if you don't know 𝐸𝐤𝐞, this is the 𝐸𝐤𝐞 catalog, the fall-winter 2023 one, and I have to get some more twill tape, so I have to put an order in. I might get more tapes. I love tapes. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is fold the whole thing towards the inside, and again, when I'm folding it, I'm going to leave between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch of the sequiny stuff peeking out. You know, I know those sequins are going to fall off. I'm just going to flick them off now, and then come back and stitch along this edge fairly close. This one I've already done. Okay, so you can see I've got a row of stitching right there. My clear elastic is only like, honestly, between 1/8 and 1/4 inch, so that's going to go through that tiny casing very well. So I don't have a problem there. I'm leaving open a gap over here by the seam allowance of the sleeve of probably at least 1 inch, so I can fit my bodkin and my elastic through there when I go to fish it through. Now, here's the thing. Does it show up on the outside? Well, yeah, but when you figure that this whole thing is going to get gathered into a piece about that big, I don't think that this white underneath is going to be the real focal piece. At least I hope not, because honestly, doing a casing out of this much sequin and have it bunched in that much could cause a problem. If I had this in a flesh tone, that would be good. So that's going to go on my list. See if I can find a flesh toned tricot tape. Okay, so let me go ahead and sew this one. Cut a piece of my clear elastic that's going to go good for a wrist size, and I don't want it to be super tight, but enough that it's going to, you know, probably like that. I think that that's good. So whatever this is, I'm going to cut it right now. Can cut 2 of those, and that is the size that I'm going to feed through my casings. Okay, so I just slipped it over my wrist to see what it looks like, and to me, you know, well, let me move it over my watch so we don't have that interfering. Even though I can see the white, I think that the main attraction is all of this sparkliness, so I'm not too worried about that little white casing in there right now. I think that, you know, that's forgivable. So I don't know where my watch is freaking out there. I'll just ignore that. So I need to go ahead and do that on this one too. So I've fed my elastic through. I've got my 2 ends here, and I do need to join these together. You know, they're tricky little buggers. So I've got my clear elastic pulled through, and I'm just tying it in a little tight knot here so that it will not want to come apart. I think that's pretty good. At this point, I'm just leaving those tails on there, you know, for safety's sake. Come on, pop back in there. All right, she is pretty well popped in. I need to come back and get those in there. Okay, I need to come back and close up these little gaps that I had my elastic fed through, and then I think we're ready to go ahead and get the sleeves set in to the bodice. Okay, so I'm going to take one of my sleeves, and remember I discussed that front and the back are very similar, so it is what it is. I'm going to make sure my sleeve is right side out, match it up to the right side out center bottom here, and get that pinned. Now, the way that I'm going to be fitting all of my extra fabric in is I'm going to fork pleat it again. So I have a similar depth of pleats. I don't honestly know if anyone will ever notice that, but I will. So what I'm going to do is on my sleeve, the first maybe 4 inches or so where the curve of the sleeve goes this way, you know, on this part, I'm just going to pin it flat so that everything is good here. All right, and I'm going to do that on both sides. And then once I have that pinned, you know, to that point on this side, then I'm going to match up the center top seam with the halfway point on my sleeve here, which will probably be a good thing to mark right now before I have it pinned over. Okay, so right about here is my center top seam. Let's see if I can stick a pin in there if it will stay. Since there's so much glitter, it might. Okay, so where that pin goes into the fabric, that's my center top. Let me get this pinned over here. Actually, it's easier now to flip it to the inside. And get this pinned up here on the top, right there. Don't know why I didn't do this just 2 seconds ago. Don't know. I'm going to pin it on both sides of that seam allowance just to keep those, you know, wanting to stay flat. Okay, let me get this side pinned over to right about here, and then we'll start folding in our pleats. Okay, I'm actually working on the other sleeve at this point, and I wanted to show you, because these sequins are just glued on, I am using my thumb to try to scrape off a bunch of them in the seam allowance area at this lower part of the sleeve, because, you know, I don't think anyone wants sequins poking them in their armpit when they're trying to be, you know, ethereal. So, all right, I think that that's pretty good. It's still got glitter, but at least you won't have sequins up there at the very edge, okay? So let me go ahead and get this pinned on. I did do the other side already, and I found that basically I can put 2 fat pleats centered on that top shoulder area, and that fits pretty well. So let me get to the bottom, sides, and top pinned, and I'll show you how I made those. Okay, so I don't even know if you're going to be able to see, but this is what I'm trying to do on the other side. Here is my shoulder seam, and I want my pleats, you know, on my back side to fall towards the back, on my front side to fall towards the front. That is more flattering. And basically, I have these 2 centered on that seam, and then 2 more beyond it, and everything else just kind of fits into place. So over here on this side, and I can tell you, fork pleating stretchy, funky illusion with glitter is not as easy as when it was lined. I'm going to start with my fork about a fork's width from where I want it to end, okay? Stick it in here, that looks about right, fold it over, and go ahead and pin it into place, okay? So this is the one that is going towards the back. And I'm going to do 1 more over here, and if there's any extra, oh my goodness, lay flat, will you? If there's any extra, because it's illusion, I can just kind of smush it together, you know. Okay, that looks pretty good. And again, you know, we're just making it work. So then that's going to lay fairly flat. I can just smush it if I need to, one side or the other. And I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. So when I sew it, first I sew the entire thing at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, okay? And I start right about here. Go all the way around. When I get to this place, I go in about 1/8 of an inch and do another row of stitching, just the bottom region, okay? So ending here. So let me see if I can get this one, so that when I'm done, you know, my stitches are going like that because it keeps coming into contact with sequins. But I have 2 rows of stitching, and that way I can clip towards that second row of stitching, you know. I'm not going all the way up to it, just close enough that this can flex so that it'll be more comfortable in that underarm area, okay? That is the goal. Let me get this sleeve put in. All right, we got her done. So I'm going to go run into town, get her shipped off, 2-day priority mail, and I think I will get it to Chicago in time. And I will be publishing this when I get the photos of her in it, so hopefully you will see that next.
Living my bucolic life, reality city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.